Your dad was Catholic, right?
Right.
But how many generations before that do you think his people were, his parents and his grandparents and his grandparents' parents were Buddhist?
Probably. You're probably right.
Right. And before then, like when do you think Buddhism like was even adopted in Vietnam?
I couldn't answer that, bro.
Right.
I don't know. Right.
Right. There's a type of Buddhism. I think it's Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism, I think.
I guess for me, I don't believe that religion is truth, but I do believe there's truth in every religion.
It's a vehicle.
Right.
Right. It's almost like would you agree with that? Like would it be safe to say that it's like a vehicle that gets you from essentially a place of uncertainty to a place of spiritual fulfillment?
Yeah, I would say so.
Mahayana Buddhism, Mahayana, I'm pretty sure in the Indic scripture literally means vehicle.
Growing up, I definitely had this phase or this period in my life where I did resent them, right?
Right.
It's not until I started to appreciate myself first as a person is when I could start to accept them as who they are.
Exactly. That's knowing where you come from so you can know eventually where you're going. And the where you're going is the identity, is the identifying of your identity, the finding of your identity through knowing both the idol-worthy qualities and those demonizing qualities.
Right.
Knowing where you come from, coming to terms with them so you can, with clearer vision and clear sight, see where it is that you're going to.
Right, so during the war, right, like during the 1970s, I believe.
Right. Well, there was technically two French Indo-Asian wars or Indo-Asiatic wars. I don't know how they term it. First, you had the French were running essentially a lot of Indo-Asia, Southeast Indo-Asia, but technically also when I was going on the Muay Thai history lesson, a lot of this ties into because Vietnam's right by Cambodia and Laos, right? Exactly, in Thailand. Well, those are all west of Vietnam. I believe it was 1857. The French went in and they started proselytizing Catholicism and Christianity.
Right.
And when they did that, they ran all of Vietnam essentially from 1857 until like 1940, I think, or 1939, around then. And then Ho Man Choi or Ho Min Choi, whatever his name is, the guy.
Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh, thank you, exactly. Ho Chi Minh. Ho Min Choi is a UFC fighter, I think. What is it?
Ho Chi Minh.
Ho Chi Minh, yeah. So Ho Chi Minh, he came around in like 39 or 40, around that time.
Okay.
And he essentially established the Communist Party of Northern Vietnam and established essentially the reason why Ho Chi Minh even adopted communism and adopted anti-capitalism was just to oppose the French and oppose the French colonialism within Vietnam.
Okay.
And that was like in the 1939, around 1940, I think. And then that was the first French Indo-Asiatic War, I think is what it technically was, from 1940 to like 1957.
Okay.
And then America started getting involved in like the late 60s, which was technically the second French Indo War. But anyway, my bad. I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. You're giving a good history lesson. Like I think you are probably more qualified than me, and you understand my culture maybe better than I do, actually. Which is
you understand it from an experience standpoint, which is something that, without going on too much of a tangent, there's two schools of thought where it's the rational point of thought where you can rationalize any experience, or the empirical point of view school of thought where you have to experience stuff.
Correct.
And I feel like you have the intimate experience, which is something I'll never know and have knowledge of unless I experienced it. But I have a level of sustained, let's just say, rational knowledge that you can also garner on top of your cultural knowledge and empirical knowledge. And that was what I was telling you about the other day when we were boxing, is like the amount of insight that can give you for yourself, knowing where you come from. You can then know where you can essentially go forward because you understand your roots a little more thoroughly.
Right.
But anyway.
But to answer your question, I know from my knowledge, my dad's side of the family, they were from the north.
Okay.
And they tried to escape war, communism like that. So they fled to the south.
South, exactly. Yep. A lot of Catholic Vietnamese, that's what they did.
Right.
Because it was communist up north and they were persecuting Catholics.
Yeah. And then my mom's side of the family, they're from the south.
Wow. Yep. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the south, there was a lot of predominant Buddhist before the Protestant Reformation within Vietnam.
No, you're right, because my dad's side is actually Catholic. My mom's side was Buddhist.
Okay.
And then obviously when they got married, my mom converted to Catholicism. Correct.
Wow.
Yep. So technically, I guess I'm like a first generation Asian American.
Okay.
So when my family came here, I had both sides of my grandparents here.
Okay.
And at the time, I do believe that my grandparents' parents were still alive.
Okay.
I think they've died in the recent years, but from my personal experience, it's just my grandparents.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've never met any like my great parents or anything like that. Yeah.
When did your grandparents migrate over here with your parents, or did they move over here, or did were your parents children when they migrated over here, or?
Yeah, and they came here over here by boat. Yeah.
Wow. And so how old were you, like your mom and dad, when they came here?
Oh man, I think my dad arrived in the States when he was like 17, bro.
Wow.
Yeah. He's the oldest male, and we have an oldest daughter, my aunt, and she actually had to go to Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but yeah, so it was just like a whole boat of them. They had to like escape a few times, actually. They got caught a couple times, and yeah, their experience is something I can't take away from them, because they've truly endured that hardship, you know, like not eating, not drinking salt water, like, and they weren't educated at the time, you know, so they were telling me stories of how they were drinking salt water, not realizing that was dehydrating them more, right?
Wow, man.
And I've heard stories about how like people who try to escape, they get like raided by pirates and shit like that. Man, it's absolutely.
So doesn't that put it in perspective though? Sometimes whenever we think about, like, there's 3 steps to how we view our parents. There's the first step of idolizing them. There are gods, literally.
Right.
Especially when we're born into this world, our mother is our planet. Our mother is our God. And it isn't until we're like more aware we start realizing like, oh, there's also another God, and that's my father. But because there's this intimate gestation period of 9 months between the mother and the child, there's a more immediate initial idolization between the child and the mother. Eventually, the child ends up idolizing the father. And eventually, there's this perfected godlike perception we have of our parents for a certain duration of our time. That was kind of the stuff you saw on the board, the me versus we stuff. And so for a certain period, it's my parents and me, because they're gods essentially to me, and I listen to everything they say because they're perfect. But then you get to the step 2 of how we view our parents, which is the demonization.
Right.
So there's the idolization and then the demonization, the subsequent demonizing of our parents, because we start realizing what? They're not perfect. We start rebelling. We get old enough to where we start realizing we have our own individual thought and our own necessary drive and urge to separate the we into a identifiable me. I have this whole play on like where you flip the me, the M on its head to become we and me, like this whole flip thing. But like I'm dyslexic and I end up like having to write it down. That's why I saw stuff on the board. So you end up doing what? You end up first idolizing them, knowing their godly-like qualities, thinking they're perfect. Then you end up demonizing them, seeing them as imperfect, flawed human beings. And it isn't until you have that third step of finally humanizing your parents, where you can reconcile full circle on some yin-yang shit, the idol-worthy qualities that your parents maintained that allowed you to be as sufficient as a human as you are, like those life lessons you're talking about in their migration just from Vietnam over to America, and you being able to intimately understand what they went through, not only on a empirical level, knowing and learning of their experiences, but on a rational level, doing your due diligence, truly understanding the macro entirety of their experience from like a historical standpoint, knowing what even led to your parents having to flee north or having to flee. Was your mom and dad together? Yeah, see, there's so many questions I had that would help me so much rationalizing it, and I don't.
So if you want to know how they met, they actually met here in the States.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So So they didn't know each other back in Vietnam. Yeah.
See, so even more so, bro, because here's what it boils down to: your mom has a whole different experience than your dad,
right?
Because your mom has the experience from being a quote unquote persecuted Buddhist Vietnamese from South Vietnam, and your dad has the experience of being a persecuted Catholic Northern Vietnamese. Like, being able to come to terms with the godlike strength for them to endure that and then come here to give you the lifestyle you have, but also counterbalance the yang or the yin to that yang, which is the demonizing aspects of how their imperfect way of trying to parent you as an American, but with traditional Vietnamese tradition. Like it's a weird sort of game.
There's a big dissonance.
It's a big dissonance, a quite literal. It's so much that being able to rationalize those two sides, I think, can give you a fuller humanizing of them in total, which will make you full circle come to terms with qualities within you.
Right.
Because I had to do that with my people, and I help all my clients do that with their people. Because when they realize there's a reason I have these negative, wayward, almost unconscious traits, like back in the day when I was in 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, all the way up until I was about 15, 16, when I got jumped and got hit with that reality check, where I had to legit realize, oh, I was bullying certain people because I was getting bullied, and it was the only way I knew how to extend that outlet of socializing, essentially.
That's how you were conditioned in your own home.
I was conditioned in my own home.
Right.
And it isn't until I'm old enough, crossing that threshold of self-awareness, where I can come to terms with, though I was conditioned to be a certain way, it's now up to me to reconcile with what's truly right and what's truly wrong with those wayward ways, the idol-worthy worshiping qualities and the demonizing recognizing worthy qualities, such as the leadership way I was, the good stuff you saw, the stuff that was positive, that was like worthy of being on some leadership shit, was counterbalanced with other people's experience on the bully side. And that's where I had to come to terms with so much on the bully side. I almost forgot about those positive experiences, like that MySpace comment. Damn.
Do you feel like you were meant to be that person, to be the person that you are now? If you had been that God that I saw you as, that positive light, do you think you could have grown as much as you did now if you were not that bully, if you were not that person? Would you have that same level of awareness and not just be living naively?
Man, that's a good... I say this on a bunch of the podcasts. Voltaire says, judge a man based off his questions and not his answers. And that's a genius question. Yeah, I think the only way you understand the heights of heaven is by having your experiences rooted in hell. The only way you can rationalize the heights of heaven is by understanding how far your roots reach. And the real reason you can see how great things are is because you know how shitty things could be or have been.
You can't experience one without the other, right?
You can't experience one without the other. That's the beauty of life. That's the yin yang. You can't live without dying. Dude, in my book, I call it the resonance of senescence. Is what I call it. Let me reword that, or let me re-say that, because I didn't want to add that. That's what I call it at the end. That was very narcissistic. In my book, I legit have a little sentence I think it's at the end in chapter 6, where I call it the resonance of senescence. And I actually may have it at the beginning of the book too, in chapter 1. And all that means is senescence is the slow deterioration of cells just based off of existing. So cells, the action of inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide, that is a senescence-like exchange of energy.
Of living and dying.
Of living while simultaneously dying. That's senescence. And I call the resonance of that senescence is what human beings are able to thoroughly understand and be self-aware and living with, which is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. That intellect, that self-awareness to be able to say, holy fuck, I'm going to die one day. I better make the best of what I can right now while I'm alive.
So what you're saying also is that awareness isn't enough, right?
No, because there has to be action behind it.
Okay.
Yeah, there has to be not only action, there has to be fruitful action. It can't be wasted movement. I think there's a stark difference between moving, saying I was at the gym for an hour, versus being at the gym for an hour and straight getting after it. You know what I'm saying? Straight killing it in the gym. Straight like milking the experience with every ounce of effort you have, because you know deep down, I'm blessed to even be alive and experience this hour at the gym today. But that ability to idolize, demonize, and have it only stop there without the eventual humanizing is something that I think is something you're very articulate in explaining from your Asian American cultural background. But that's something that I think every freaking human in the 21st century, especially in our generation, goes through because we don't have that religious moral foundation in place.
Okay.
I don't mean to keep defaulting to that.
No, you're good.
I am a reverend, so I am ordained. But it's like one of those things where like I think that is the catalyst, though, to a lot of what's... Because think about it, bro. Like, your dad was Catholic, right?
Right.
But how many generations before that do you think his people were, his parents and his grandparents and his grandparents' parents were Buddhist?
Probably. You're probably right.
Right. And before then... Like, when do you think Buddhism like was even adopted in Vietnam?
I couldn't answer that, bro. I don't know. Right.
Right. There's a type of Buddhism. I think it's Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism. I think it's a form of Indian Buddhism. I think on the southwest side, there's a bunch of forms of Hinduism, Buddhism. Like, if you think about like how long ago did my parents' parents even adopt Buddhism? And what did they believe before that, right? Like, you're able to more intimately ask that question. And because you can ask that question, I think it's important to ask that question so you can have at least some formal substantiated rationalization for what the empirical experiences your ancestors may have endured. Not just what you know from your parents, but what you can only imagine and rationalize through your parents' parents' by knowing that history.
Right.
Essentially, up until 1857, from like 100 AD up until about 1857, so for almost 2,000 years, that whole region, all of Indo-Asia was pretty much Buddhist. And that's why like some of the biggest statues in the world are of Buddha, right? Of Siddhartha Gautama. So then you got to ask yourself, okay, your mom literally was Buddhist and transitioned in her lifetime from Buddhism to Catholicism. Like, what kind of, again, dissonance does that create in terms of her fundamental belief structure? And then these are things you just have to ask yourself and consider when you judge them from the idolizing, the demonizing, and then with that eventual humanizing. Does that make sense? These are things that I had to think about when I realized, like, you come from the American 21st century millennial perspective of not having... Did you go to church growing up?
I did.
Up until when?
So in Catholicism, there is something called a confirmation where you kind of just like get confirmed. After that, that's when I stopped going.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. And what was that, like 13?
No, it's like when you're 16, 17.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like junior in high school.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. But you were going to mass every Sunday?
So, bro, I was going to school like 6 days a week, bro. So I would have American school and then I'd have Bible school on Sunday. Yeah.
Man, that's what Muslims go through. That's what your mom went through.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So... You can appreciate at least, though, the foundation that, like, Christianity offers, right?
I do.
Versus nothing. Like, versus not believing in shit.
I guess for me, I don't believe that religion is truth, but I do believe there's truth in every religion.
It's a vehicle.
Right.
Right. It's almost like, would you agree with that? Like, would it be safe to say that it's like a vehicle that gets you from essentially a place of uncertainty to a place of spiritual fulfillment?
Yeah, I would say so.
Mahayana Buddhism, Mahayana, I'm pretty sure in the Indic scripture, literally means vehicle. So like your mom's traditional and your ethnic traditional Buddhism that you would have followed.
Yeah.
That, what was the monk that lit himself on fire? What was his name? Something like that. Quang, and then his last name was Thich.
I don't even want to mess it up, so I'll have to like look it up.
Okay, but what did you say upstairs? Because I think it was like,
right. Yeah, Tick, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
Young Tick. Young Tick. There was a T. It was a T, like a tick.
It's an NH.
Oh, okay. Like
yeah, so
tick.
And I think if you don't grow up learning a different language, you can't actually make that sound.
My point.
Yeah.
Bro, Russians grow up like, I think Americans have their tongue up, touching their roof of their mouth when we're just chilling.
Yeah.
And Russians, theirs is like sitting at the bottom of their mouth.
Oh.
That allows them to like glot certain phonetic sounds that is just harder for Americans.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I agree with that 100%, especially Asian languages. Like, there's a whole different phonetic like usage of the tongue on the back end and the front end and what that means based off the inflection of it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that monk that burned himself, Thick Guang is what I see on Google. And I remember reading that whenever I learned about this in high school. What it was is, as a Mahayana Buddhist, especially as a monk, he truly believed the body is so irrelevant that he was going to pour gasoline on him and say, in cause of this rebellion, to show you guys how wrong it is for you to persecute us Buddhists who have had this tradition in our family, in our generations for thousands of years. You guys are not persecuting us because of some new age stuff that you call Catholicism and communism. And so what a Buddhist monk literally did, and we have this on camera, we have the video and pictures of it documented, poured gasoline on himself and lit himself on fire. 1963 in Hue or Hue, Vietnam.
That was a good pronunciation. Yeah.
Oh, I did a phlegm at the second one.
That was good.
Hue?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Look at you guys speak Vietnamese. Because Hanoi is the capital, right?
In the north, correct.
In the north, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because is there still a split between the two?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. See, that shows my limitations on even the modern geopolitical implications of northern versus southern Vietnam.
So in the south, they use Ho Chi Minh or they use Saigon.
Okay, wow.
Yep.
Even though Ho Chi Minh was the northern establishing of the communism.
I think that's why they call it Saigon now, yeah.
Gotcha! Hilarious! That's hilarious. Oh, wow. See, we're learning something, bro. Because it's technically the state of Vietnam is southern Vietnam, right?
They use they actually use the northern flag.
They use the northern flag?
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. They're not technically split anymore then, are they?
Only by regions. I don't think politically.
I think they're unified though after the Vietnam War.
Right.
Okay. Because I know that the North was the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Just like the North and the do you know anything about North Korea's situation or about the Korean situation?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Right. So the same exact sort of historical implications of one region saying we like communism, the other region saying hell not to communism. And America said we're going to back those who hate communism, and the Russians and the Chinese said we're going to back those who love communism.
Right.
And that's what the Korean War was. That's what the Vietnamese War was, especially when America got involved. Before, it was legit an internal struggle between the Northern Democratic Republic or the Soviet-like communistic state of Northern Vietnam versus the Southern Democratic capitalistic state of Vietnam.
Right.
And that was just a political difference that again stemmed from the conquerors and the colonists that came before it, which were the French from 1857 up until about 1940, whenever the Germans attacked the French and the French can't defend their colonies anymore. So what ended up happening? Japan ended up invading the power vacuum that was in Vietnam at the time. Japan invaded, put their own person in power, and then Ho Chi Minh essentially got into place and said, nah, I'm representing the people. And that's what ended up happening when they won they kicked the French out and they ended up winning. And then there was the Geneva, I don't know if it was the Geneva Conference, the Geneva Agreement or whatever it was. I think it was Geneva. It's because the Vietnamese won, they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to separate us, leave us alone in the north. You guys take the south. That's essentially what they did.
Right.
But since the south was still being, it was being funded and it was being backed by capitalistic economies, there was more incentive for those capitalistic economies to not only have the South try to invade and conquer the North, but to constantly have tension between the two so they could eventually usurp them and conquer them, yeah. And that's why the Vietnam War ended up happening in the 70s, because deep down, JFK was pretty much like, we're just going to let you guys we're going to help fund you guys. We're going to supply guns. We're going to supply ammunition. We're going to supply weapons. We're going to supply everything that you guys need, but we're not going to send our troops. And guess what? Within a month of a coup d'etat happening in Vietnam, where communism ended up taking over essentially, within a month, JFK got assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson gets put into place, and we go straight to Vietnam, essentially, and go to war. Yeah. So you can say there's deeper shit in play, which there probably is, but it just shows that, if you at least understand the first principles of where our history comes from and where our parents actually came from and what they endured, it can put it in perspective for you to appreciate how fucking good you have it and eventually humanize the demonized qualities that we were holding on to for so long. Makes you a little bit more appreciative of, maybe my dad treated me a certain way and my mother treated me a certain way because
they went through these certain things.
Because they went through these certain things.
Yeah. Growing up, I definitely had this phase or this period in my life where I did resent them, right?
Right.
It's not until I started to appreciate myself first as a person is when I could start to accept them as who they are.
Exactly. That's knowing where you come from, so you can know eventually where you're going. And the where you're going is the identity, is the identifying of your identity, the finding of your identity through knowing both the idol-worthy qualities and those demonizing qualities.
Right.
Knowing where you come from, coming to terms with them, so you can, with clearer vision and clear sight, see where it is that you're going to.